Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I want to make sure I admitted everyone.
Ooh, that's a scary looking skeleton back there.
This is my muse, Orpheus. Already, are we ready to get started?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is Opus Night, and you have entered Night Vision. We have Scott, Glenn, and Anthony.
Anthony, yeah.
Anthony. Can I call you Anthony?
Yeah, you can call me Anthony, Tony, whatever you want.
All righty. Gentlemen, I'm going to have you go through. Do you have your books on hand?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. We are going to kind of switch things around tonight. Ordinarily, I'd have you read them at the end, but apparently a few of our viewers have missed the books and had to go through and, look for what author they wanted. So I'm going to start trying to put them on first. So, Anthony, we're going to start us off with you.
Okay. This is my book. It's called Legacy.
Beautiful.
And it's actually the first book in the Dominion series.
Okay.
I've just started. Do you need any background on it or just go right into reading it?
Read your blog on the back and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
And they'll be happy.
I'll actually take these off. All right. As the American Revolution rages on in the colonies, operatives from the Dominion are there to give birth to democracy in the United States as a part of a bigger plan to spread freedom throughout the world. What the colonists don't know is that some of the most prominent figures rebelling alongside them have traveled back in time from the 22nd century to secure a victory for the colonies. When the console, the machine that sent them back in time, malfunctions, it leaves the operatives trapped in 18th century America. The operatives fight to stay alive long enough to get back home, where their team in the 22nd century works furiously to bring them home safely. The operatives must try to get back home while still carrying out their mission to free the colonies or risk drastically altering history and freedom as we know it forever. If their mission fails, they will come back to an America that never gained its freedom. The America they departed from will no longer exist. As time begins to run out in both centuries, a sinister plot is uncovered that may bring down the Dominion and leave the operatives stranded in a war zone 400 years in the past. The future of America and of democracy in the world hang in the balance.
That sounds amazing. I love it.
I'm glad you like it.
You want to tell them your full name?
My full name is Anthony Tonelli, and I just published that book, Legacy, is actually my very first published book. It was published on my birthday last Tuesday. So it was very exciting. Thank you. Yeah, it was weird because I'm a little late to the writing and publishing game because I've been putting it off for so long. But my book was actually came out on my 50th birthday. So I was like, never too late. And I decided to last year I started writing during the pandemic because I had time on my hands finally. And I began with a short story, which is the first chapter in this book. And eventually it evolved into an entire book. And now it's actually part one of a series. And I'm already 20,000 words into the second book. So I'm super excited about it. Like I said, I'm still new to it. I'm still learning a lot of stuff. But I love writing, and this has been an awesome experience so far.
Well, we are so excited, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thanks for the support. Thank you.
And as I don't know if you gentlemen have been told, but this is an open forum. So whatever we discuss, please jump in. If you have any questions about anything to any other author, feel free.
Well,
okay.
I just wanted to say, Anthony, that I love that because I teach U.S. history, and especially early American history. So yeah, that's great. I mean, that sounds like a really fun book. I'd love to read it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Scott. I'm actually among the things that I've not gotten around to until later on. I'm currently enrolled at Arizona State, and I'm a history major because I want to teach.
Oh, okay.
I want to teach civics in high school.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it kind of ties into all that. And my focus is on the U.S. Revolution. So the first book I wrote was something that was near and dear to my heart.
Mhm.
And it kind of evolved from there. I started with this premise of, someone lighting the spark, so to speak. And then the story just evolved from there. And then I had to give it a story, a future part of the story from where these people came from to kind of explain what their situation was. So there's a couple of layers to it. It takes place in two different time periods. And you've got these operatives that are trying to bring freedom to the colonies, but at the same time, they themselves may end up remaining trapped in that time frame. And if they don't succeed, the America that they grew up in will never exist. So it kind of gave me a fun backdrop to write it in, because it allowed me to be creative with future stuff. But if you read it, you'd be very proud. I actually stuck to the historical facts quite a bit, right down to the point where as the story moves on and I throw out some dates, I have Washington's troops exactly where he was in reality. And I wrote the entire book. Basically, it takes place down the street from where I grew up. And during my research, I found out that George Washington used an old house that was there, an old mansion. He used it as his headquarters for about 6 weeks in the fall of 1776. So I incorporated all that into the story. So it was I did a lot of research for it. But yeah, I think it's really cool. So someone who's really into history, especially American Revolution, I think they'll really dig this, because I loved writing it, and I think that people who read it will take that from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good.
We love when we have new writers. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Because we get to know them before anyone else.
That's right.
Has had a chance to interview them or find out anything about you. So you said you wrote this during the pandemic?
I started writing it. I had the idea in my head for a while, but last year, I have a 5-year-old who's like super, super active. So getting time to write isn't always the most convenient. And the day before Memorial Day, my father-in-law came over to see how we were doing. He hadn't seen us since the beginning of the pandemic. So, and my daughter insisted she was going to go stay with them. And we were like, well, are you okay with that? And they're like, yeah, she can come for one night. We don't go anywhere. We've been just at our house in here. So she goes, and that morning, on Memorial Day morning, I start writing. And ironically, it was Memorial Day. I didn't even realize it. I noticed that later on, but it was on Memorial Day, I start writing the story about the U.S. Revolution. And I originally wrote it. It was supposed to be just a short story. I was going to do a collection of short stories to work as origin stories for my other books. And what ended up happening was I wrote that, and another author said to me, short stories don't really move very well in terms of sales unless your name is already known. When you're the first one, when it's your first one, it's a little bit harder to get people into it. So from there it evolved. But the entire first chapter of the book, which is close to 6,000 words, I wrote it all in one afternoon. I just went right through it because I kind of had the story in my head already. The rest of it took a little bit longer. Eventually, she came back home, so it took a little bit longer. And there was, like I said, there was tons of research done for this book because I wanted, say for example, someone like Scott reads it. I want them to be able to read it and say, you know what? That's the way it happened. That's what we have on the record. So. Placing fictional characters in real settings and basically, just kind of weaving them right into the tapestry of what was already actually part of the historical record was very important to me, even right down to the layout of the streets in Manhattan at the time. It had to be accurate. Yes, no one's going to be able to go back and verify everything, but to me, it mattered because like I said, in case someone like Scott or one of my history professors reads it, they'll know that I actually did my due diligence to make sure that it had that authenticity to it.
That is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Because in a lot of stories that's one of the things that readers will catch on very quickly. They're like, okay, well, this place doesn't exist, or this doesn't this. And granted, it's fiction, but when you can create that drama at the height of something that they know has already happened with those characters, it's amazing. So
Right.
we are already so proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
I really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Glenn, you ready to tell us about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So this is the book. It's called The Child of Chaos. I did not write this in an afternoon. I actually have been working on it for about 20 years. So I'm a game designer, and I worked on a lot of licenses, including working with authors like Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, Robert Jordan, Piers Anthony, Frederick Pohl, making games inside of their world. And basically, at the time, I was one of the only people in the world making fiction inside of these established worlds. And so the night before I was supposed to do a pitch to a publisher, Activision, about selling Wheel of Time to them, they said, we love the game, but we don't want the license. We don't want Wheel of Time. And that took me by surprise. I'm like, that's like one of the major selling points of the game. And so they told me, come up with a different premise and pitch it tomorrow. And so that night, I came up with a premise. I pitched it to them, and we ended up going with another publisher who actually did want the Wheel of Time, but that premise stuck with me. And after I was done with Wheel of Time, I thought about it, and I said, is there a game here that I can make? But I realized it wasn't a game. It was a novel. And it took me 20 years to write that novel. And that ended up being Child of Chaos. And it's been out since the end of last year. I guess I should read the blurb. So nothing can break the stranglehold the gods of order have on the world except a roll of the dice. An irresistible longing drags young Galen to an ancient vault where long ago the gods of order locked chaos away. Chaos promises power to the one destined to liberate it, but Galen's dreams warn of dark consequences. He isn't the only one racing to the vault, however. Horus, the bully who lives to torment Galen, is determined to unleash chaos, and he might know how to do it. Galen's imagination always got him into trouble, but now it may be the only thing that can prevent Horus from unraveling the world. So I love this world, and the reaction to the book has been really, really positive, and people love that world as well. So I currently have the prequel to this book called Game of War in editing, and I'm working on the sequel called Curse of Chaos, but this is the only one that's currently out now.
Well, that sounds incredible, but I have to ask.
Yep.
Coming from a gaming background, because I am a gamer, I love like Warcraft, Skyrim. I like not only the adventures, but the stories. And especially if they have dialogue in them. That's killer to me. It's like, oh yes, because I'm real big on anime as well. So stories are my life. One way or the other, they always intertwine into no matter what I find I'm doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, that's what drives me. It's what always drives me is storytelling. And before there were RPGs, there were adventure games. And adventure games, there's really nothing besides story, because you're walking a character through all of the obstacles that character would have to face in order to get to the end of the story. In one game, and actually, I think I have. So this is Deathgate, one of the games I've made, and it's based on the Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman books, Deathgate Cycle. There was more text in here than in a traditional novel, and a lot of it was dialogue, and a lot of it was voiced too. And I had the pleasure of not only casting it but directing the voice in there and providing a voice for one of my characters. And so after all of that, it just made sense. I am the narrator of the audiobook for Child of Chaos, which actually I just released only a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
That's pretty cool.
Well, you just found 3 new best friends.
Yep,
I promise you that. So now I can say I've had a gamer on here as well. I'm so excited.
That's pretty cool. So have you said it took you basically 20 years to get it to print. In that 20 years, were you working on it, or was it like one of those things where like it was in the back of your head and you just knew you had a story that you just didn't have a chance to put it down on paper?
Well, so a bit of both. I mean, obviously I wasn't working on it every day for 20 years. I had a full-time job. I was, making big products with big teams. And those tend to be, those hours don't tend to be very forgiving. But I had people, very creative people that I worked with in making games that I was able to bounce the thing off of. And actually it took many, many years before I found somebody. I sent it to somebody, but it accidentally ended up in her inbox. It was someone I actually, I didn't expect to react to it at all. And when she told me she got it, she's like, "Did you really mean me to get this?" And I said, "Well, no, but you can read it if you want to. I'd love to get your feedback." And that changed everything for me. She viewed it as synchronicity, that she got this thing. She just read a book about synchronicity. And she gave me the best beta read feedback I've ever gotten. It changed the book for me. She read it twice. She read not only the book once, but also the feedback, the revised version when I got it back to her. And so it took 20 years of me sort of not only figuring out really where the book needed to be, but also getting to the point where I was ready to release it. I was ready for people to see it. It was in a state where I not only, I was proud of it, but I thought people would appreciate it as well. So yeah, like the book after that, Game of War, I wrote during quarantine, pretty much. So it took me about 9 months to write. And so it doesn't take me 20 years to write a book. It just took me 20 years to write that book.
I hear you. Oh, that's interesting. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. There are so many questions I know that we want to ask. I mean, gaming is like, it's huge. And I feel like the past 10 years especially have just, it's blown up in so many ways. So first person on writing dialogue in a game is like my favorite, because if you can walk through as that person, you're the avatar, I'm all in. And
So
the scarier, the better.
Let me ask you a question then, because there is a sort of a disconnect between if you're writing dialogue if you make a character that the player is playing, then it's possible to write dialogue for that character. But the more you want the player to be immersed in the experience, the less you can impose a personality on them. Do you understand?
I will argue that point to the hills.
Well, maybe I'm not explaining it correctly, because if you come and play my game, I don't know you. Right. And so if I give you dialogue, I wouldn't necessarily write what you would say. But if you come in and play the game as the character, that I have developed or I've pulled from a literary work, then I can write dialogue for that character, and you can choose what that person says based on what I know that person would say. And the more developed that character becomes, the more compelling the dialogue is that I can write for them. But from a lot of people like to be immersed. They like to create their character. They go into an MMORPG and they say, that's me, and I made all the features of that character. You don't know my backstory. You don't know anything about me. I'm going to impose my own self onto that character. Right, and that is very difficult for an author to write dialogue for.
Yeah.
Now, when a character is given, I'm not real big on creating the character traits when it comes to the character. I could care less whether she has blonde hair, blue eyes, whether she's an orc. I don't care. I want to know the backstory about the character. That's really important to me, because if I have a foundation, then you can give me choices on which way I want that character to go. And I don't want them to be simple choices. I don't want something simplistic like, oh, we're going to go to the woods, and we're going to fight, whatever. I want to be able to decide more on the mental state. Like, okay, he just had a fight, okay, or a war. They went to war, however you want to, whatever kind of game it is. I want to know how they felt about it. I want more emotion in the characters. I want to know the story of the characters they interact with, because the more real it feels, the more, you know, the character, the more real it is to me.
Have you ever played any of the Telltale games?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of what I think you're talking about, because those aren't fighting games. Those aren't, there's no stats. You don't create your own character. I mean, they know who the character lineup is, but you're also making choices. And in fact, their philosophy, their design philosophy is they present you with a choice and they track which choice you made over all the people who made those choices. And if they get it to be 50-50, they've succeeded. So it's not black and white. You know, you personally are imposing, like, well, what's your moral standing on this? Do I save this person, or do I save this person? You know, or do I become someone that I don't want to become, but in order to do something that eventually will be good? It's all up to you. And you feel like you've made a significant choice in the telling of that story. Yeah. And so I agree with you. I absolutely agree. And I also, to my point, I, as an author, want to know who those characters are so I can write for them. Because the things that you are not necessarily excited by, creating a character, figuring out your hair color and all of that, there are legions of people who do want to do that. They want it all to be about them. They want the story to be about how they interacted with the world, not and fought orcs and, you know, did whatever. They want to tell their own story, and that's fine. But it takes less of a, you know, of my time, my effort to create the story that I would necessarily want to tell with a person like that, because they want to create their own. In fact, the more I create for them, the more they buckle against it, because they want freedom and I'm trying to tell a story.
Well, let me give you this background with myself. I'm not exactly your ordinary person by any means. And I play things like Outlast, but then I can go over and play WoW. Okay. And that's character created, you know, the hair, the
yep,
and all
absolutely.
that. But then again, I can, another day, one of my favorites is The Long Dark, which is a solitary game. You're, you know, by yourself, and it's a survival game.
Right.
But this, between the scenery and you being able to, there's no dialogue in it other than, yes, they have a story that they have kind of interjected in the past couple of years, but I've been playing it for years. And, you know, the most beautiful part of it is that you get to go and explore. Character, it's all about the exploration, you know, and you don't have to give them 1,000 choices. I don't care if you come up with 5 storylines, 4, as long as they are amazing at the fact that you have some kind of thought and choice, and it's questioning your morality, or it's more important for the character to have feelings and emotions, because I'm huge on emotions, you know, especially when it comes to readers, you know, that I want to create the atmosphere as well as where the placement of the character is, what their story is, what their background is. You know, I want to walk through something as though I am living vicariously through it. And I feel that way with games as well. So
yeah,
I could go on all night. Scott, we love you. We miss you. It's your turn, love. Tell us all about yourself.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I do not have a copy of my book with me. I drove up to San Antonio to visit my granddaughter, and so my book is back at home. I could show. Is there a way I can share my screen? Can I show it that way?
I believe so.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen, and I can do it that. Let's see. Okay, you guys can see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, okay, so that's my book over there on the left. All right. Okay, and it has a very strange name. I Call Him Him is the name of the book. Okay, let me stop sharing. All right, and then, hold on. All right, let me read the blurb. Okay, so here we go. In a post-apocalyptic world, a warrior and his family are driven underground, fighting for their very survival. When they do emerge, the futuristic planet they discover is very different from the one they left behind. Ruled by an evil presence which dominates and controls what is left of mankind, Earth has been reduced to a violent place of darkness, grief, and destruction. I Call Him Him follows the journey of this unnamed warrior as he loses both his family and his mind. As he hits rock bottom, all he can think of is his insatiable yearning for revenge, until he meets a very special girl called Angelica. Her youth, innocence, and strength of character reminds him of everything he has lost and the things which really matter. But as the armies of the world rise up for the ultimate battle of good versus evil, can Angelica can Angelica help him regain his sanity and rediscover himself before it's too late? Author Scott Kimak takes the classic theme of good and evil and gives it a modern twist in this action-packed tale of the importance of keeping hope in the bleakest of circumstances.
That sounds amazing.
It
Well,
does.
thank you.
It really does. Can you show the title again? I mean the cover again.
Yeah, hold on. Okay. Yeah, let me see. I don't know if wait a minute, hold on. If I click on the page, maybe it blows it up too, I think, right? Let me see. Oh yeah, there we go.
I love that. That is cute.
Oh, it already jumped to the story though. Okay. All right. But anyway,
Screenshot that and I'm reading that later.
So anyway, hearing Anthony and Glenn, it's kind of actually I have a little bit in common with both of you. Anthony, you said you didn't start writing till you were, I think, 50 years old. You said, right?
Oh, I started writing last year, but it was published on my 50th.
Oh, okay. Well, I was 50. I'm 53 now, but I was 51 when I started writing the story. But however, there was really almost a 40-year gap since the time I started writing the story. So when I was 13 years old, I actually came up with the idea, and the book is part of a trilogy. So this is book one of the trilogy. But I came up with the story when I was 13, and I'm a huge martial arts. I've been practicing martial arts my whole life and have taught it for many years. So I really admired and looked up to my shifu, to my kung fu teacher. And so I brought the first few pages. I wrote the first few pages. I brought it to him, and I said, "Oh, look I'm writing this story, and and the main character, is a kung fu master and stuff. And what do you think?" And he starts looking at it, and he just laughed, and he says, "Stop wasting your time on this and go practice your martial arts." And that just broke my heart, And I never tried writing again until just 2 years ago. So so there was like a 38-year gap, in between. And so I'm a school teacher, as I said. I teach history, so I get a lot of time off in the summer. And so this was 2 years ago during the summer. I was just sitting there. I don't know. There's nothing good on TV, and I pulled my laptop over and I said, and I don't know, it just came to me. I said, you know what? I'm gonna try writing that story that I started 38 years ago. I started writing, and I just kept typing and typing and typing. I typed like all day long until my fingers were numb, And I looked at it and I said, hey, this isn't too bad, and at least from my opinion. And so I took it to my wife, and my wife is probably, my harshest critic. My wife doesn't sugarcoat anything. She's going to tell you if it sucks, she's going to tell you it sucks, And so I brought it to her, and she starts reading it, and I see her, like starting to cry. And I'm like, and she's like, wow, this is fantastic. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, well, maybe I got something here, And so anyway, so I continued writing it, whenever I could find the time. My schedule was pretty busy between being a history teacher in the day and teaching martial arts at night. So, but I found time to finish it, and I published it last July. So it's been out for, I don't know, like 9 months now, maybe. Yeah. And, but it's been, just a great and fun adventure. And now it's just become an obsession with me to write. The second book, I already finished the second book, and the second book actually comes out in 2 weeks on May 6th. The second book, it's called The Angel of Death, and that one will be coming out. And then the third book, I'm about 75% done with. So I'm hoping in the summer, probably in the summer sometime, I should have that one finished.
Nice.
You
Nice.
see, this is beautiful because each one of you, this is your own journey that is starting.
Yeah.
And oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy for all of you. And congratulations to all of you if I forget to tell you.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you.
I am in all of your corner.
So, Scott, I had a question for you.
Yes.
You said you started writing it like when you were 13.
Yes.
If you were to compare the idea you had then to now, is the story kind of somewhere in there, or is it like completely unrecognizable to what you originally wrote?
It's the skeleton was there, somewhat the overall idea of what I wanted about this, this unnamed warrior, kind of like from the old spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, that type. That's but more in the future,
Right.
and where he's on this, quest for revenge because of what they did to his family and so forth. I kind of had like the skeleton of it, but I've added so many things into it. There are actually, like, I took parts of things that actually happened in my life and kind of worked them into the story as flashback scenes, of course, put a little twist on it, made it more exciting, but yeah, of course, at 13, I hadn't experienced those things yet. So yeah, it wouldn't be the same book if I would have wrote it back then, compared to now. So maybe it was, the best thing to have those life experiences and be able to put those in.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that you were able to, over the time, you were able to take your original story and then say, well, I've had these things happen. I can incorporate them in there. Because you're right. When you were 13, you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, of course.
So number one, congratulations on getting that done.
Oh, thank you. Same to you.
I love the premise of the story. Anytime a story, a description of a story, a blurb or whatever, involves post-apocalyptic and mankind is almost gone, I'm usually in from the get-go. Eventually, I plan to do a series similar, not similar to yours, but in that mindset of, it's a very different world kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I love the story as you described it. And number two, any book whose title is the same name as my favorite song from Slayer, dude, I'm definitely in on it.
I didn't even know there was a song called Him.
Didn't say anything. I had to laugh.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't. I was good.
I'm a huge fan of I used to play in a metal band.
Oh, okay.
I've done a lot of things in the time between when I wanted to start writing and now. I played when I was in high school. I played in a death metal band.
Oh, awesome.
So like death metal and thrash metal are really big. I'm still into it. And then for a while, for 11 years, I was a professional wrestler, which is actually where I honed in my idea of how to tell stories. Because
Really?
in
Wow.
that setting, I had to tell stories without ever using words. I had to use actions. I had to use basically body language to tell a story to people who somehow understood what was happening but didn't know what was coming next.
What was your character? Did you have a character?
Yes, I was known as the Brooklyn Bomber, Tony Montana.
Oh.
And
Scarface.
I worked as a heel for 11 years. A heel, for those of you that are not familiar with the terminology, I was a bad guy for 11 years. I just felt very natural. Ever since I was a kid, I always used to root for the bad guys when I would watch wrestling. Like I was like one of the only kids in my school that hated Hulk Hogan. I was like, dude, I wanted to be Roddy Piper. I wanted to be Ric Flair. I wanted to be like the guys who always broke the rules and got away with it.
Right.
But it's funny because as I'm writing a story, that the stuff that I learned from when I was wrestling plays a big part into it. Just even creating an arc for a character works the way we have what we call programs, where it's basically two guys that wrestle each other for a while, and they tell their story, and eventually someone ends up, in the final match, someone's triumphant, someone goes down, and it's great because wrestling fans then forget about it. The next day, you move on to the next person you're fighting, but as you're telling a story, a lot of people don't understand this, is when you're in a ring, we know what's supposed to happen. We don't always know how we're going to do it. A lot of it has to do with the way we feed off the fans. And that basically tells us how to do it. So as I was writing the book, I had an idea of what I wanted the characters to do, but not exactly sure how. So I created a kind of a template of what I refer to as a wrestling template. In every wrestling match, we know the opening, we know what knows the transition, the middle part, and we know the finish before we go in there.
Mm-hmm.
For this book, I knew the beginning, I knew the middle, and I knew what the finale was going to be. I didn't know what I was going to do in between.
Right.
And that's the part where I trusted my instincts and I tried to play it by ear, to the point where my wife thinks I was nuts. I don't know, I was saying this to her, but I said, she read the book. She was my editor, which was great because my wife is not sci-fi at all. So it was great because she wasn't going to look at it as so much as a fan of the genre, as opposed to, does it make sense? Will it reach across to someone who's not necessarily into sci-fi? And of course, she was like, oh, with all the grammar and stuff. Because as you're writing, I don't know if this happened to you, as I'm typing, she's like, do you believe in periods? Do you believe in, like, because you're trying to get your ideas down so fast that you skip over some of the stuff. But as I was writing it, she's like, how'd you write this character? This character came out really good. And I said, I didn't so much write the character as I basically passed on what the character told me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Once I had an idea about it, the character started telling me what they would do.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would have ideas about, I want them in this situation. And then I would just let them start talking through me. And I was able to develop it's dialogue heavy. Almost the entire story is told in conversation. Mm-hmm. So I felt that allowed me to be able to tell a story in a way which was conveys to people a lot easier. But more importantly, they got to know the characters more, especially where it's the first book of a trilogy. Some of these characters are going to be featured in all 3 books. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted people to start getting familiar with them and creating a rapport with those characters, which sounds like, as you were describing it, I was like, well, that sounds like a really cool, interesting story. Oh, but there's more to it, so, and the fact that you never bothered naming him, that's a genius device that I had not even thought of. I went through a lot of trouble creating names and stuff, and you were like, we'll just call him him. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that?
It's weird. I just, I don't know, it just occurred to me one day, I kept thinking, I'm going to call him the Dark Warrior, or, something like, just something like that. And then I just said, well, because he doesn't speak at least in the beginning. Okay. So that's why nobody really knows what his name is. They don't know who he is. And they just say, oh yeah, that's him over there, and so when I said that, and I like, yeah, that's it. I'll just call it that. I call him. I figure nobody else is going to name a book that. I mean, sometimes when you put a book on Amazon, there's 20 books out there that have the same name as your book does, but because there's so many books out, that are millions of books that are out there on Amazon. But I said, I don't think anyone else is going to have this name. And so far I haven't seen it. So.
Purely ingenious.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
So in writing dialogue, how many of you deal with the emotional, psychological side of the characters?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, my books, I mean, it's a real tearjerker, actually, considering it's a book that, you think about this dark, warrior that's out for revenge, and you kind of think like, oh, this is a guy's book, and it is a guy's book in a way. But I've had so many women read this book and say, oh my God, I couldn't stop crying the entire book, because, it's just about how dealing with this, losing his family, and what kind. And I think anyone could, if anyone lost their child or the person they, their wife or husband, the person they loved, what kind of impact would that have on them? Mm-hmm. And so from the emotional standpoint, it's just like being on a roller coaster ride. It really digs into your gut and makes you kind of turn to a dark place. And I guess, as I write it, like Anthony was saying, I would become the characters too. And sometimes I'd feel like, as I'm writing, like, that character would take control a little bit, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting like, this isn't the kind of person I am. What I want to do when I'm writing. I sometimes had to, almost like hold back a little bit. But yeah, you can feel, you just, that emotional strain on it, and it really pushes it, to the limits. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to shock people. I wanted to shock them a little bit. I wanted them to feel, angry at times and sad at times, but then also, feel happy and even laugh at times too. I really wanted to have them totally off balance, and that's what really makes it a good page turner also, is they just keep moving through it because they get so invested into the book.
Now,
there's a character in Child of Chaos that's the villain. And it took a while until I really understood who he was. I really wasn't happy once I did. And there was one chapter. He's actually one of the main characters. I mean, I tell the book through his perspective and the protagonist's perspective. And I came to one chapter and I'm like, I don't want to write this. I know what he's going to do, and I don't want to know. I don't want to write it. I can't. And it took me a while until I finally brought myself to do that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think a large part of what makes the emotional impact that you can chase after work is empathy. So you have to know, you have to be able to get into the head of that character and say, yeah, of course he's doing these things because of this, because I know who he is and it's happening, and all of these things, that all of the loss that he's gone through before, of course he's doing these sort of things, and I'm there with you and I'm feeling those things with the character. And so you just have to do the work. You just have to know who that character is. You have to build out that backstory. You figure out who they really are and what makes them tick, in order for the reader to really get that too.
And show that conflict and struggle maybe that he's having on the decisions he's making, because he's having a hard time dealing with what he's actually doing, seeing if it's wrong or right.
I just had this experience recently in just a writing session. I had two characters coming together, and it's perfect. When this happens, it's like that 50-50 choice. Both of them were equally justified in their positions, and they were diametrically opposed. And they had a conversation that was perfect. It's like, you can't, both of you are right. And so, and seeing that conflict and being in the middle of it is awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty. I find that writing villains, again, because of my background, I find that to be A, more fun, and B, I find it a little bit easier. Now, ironically, there isn't a true villain revealed in this book until much later, almost near the end, because then you realize there's been a hand that no one knew about behind the scenes doing things. And as I did that, I knew that in the second book, I had to develop that character more. And for me, the key to making a villain work is a certain vulnerability. If they are one-dimensional, even I that really love, no one ever really was a huge fan of Darth Vader until you found out what he had gone through.
His
and then
backstory, yes,
because
that's my big thing. That backstory, that builds the heart of the character,
right?
Even if they had nothing but a vicious background,
right?
Now it's you being able to trace his steps in the future,
because when you watch all of us, when you first watched what is now episode 4, he seems very one-dimensional and ruthless, and then you get to know, now I get the pain. Now I get where the anger is coming from. Now I get where his loss of humanity is coming from.
Right.
Without that, it would have been a very forgettable one-dimensional character. So that rapport you build with the audience is through the villain, to me is very important, because again, coming from the background that I came from, we always had the understanding the heel was always the guy that told the story. You know, if the good guys are winning all the time, who's going to pay a ticket to go watch us? You know, the whole idea is that the villain is the villain, and then somehow there's just some kind of hope for that, you know, for the good guy to come through. There has to be a weakness, you know. And I thought it was genius when I was a kid that even superheroes had weaknesses. You know, think about it. Lex Luthor had no real weakness, but Superman did. And I thought, well, as I got older, I thought that's genius, because here's a guy who, because he's super intelligent and understands science so well, can bring this Superman to his knees, you know, simply because he's aware of what his weakness is. So when I write a character, if it's, you know, he's got to have moments where the audience is like, oh, I hate this guy. But there's also has to be something there to let him know why this happened, you know. And in the book that I'm working on now, like I said, I only sprinkled the idea of what was coming, and there's actually 3 villains in the next one, and those were characters that originally were either not really mentioned or everyone thought, hey, this is one of the good guys. So being able to tell how they got to where they are, I find that to be super interesting. And because of the nature of the book that I'm doing, a lot of it is done through dialogue. So it's not that third person telling you what happened before. It's, as you're writing, like Scott said, you kind of become that character and you're pouring emotion into the dialogue to convey that across, you know. And when I first started writing, I was like, well, you know, they're trying to convey to the other person. I realized very early on, I'm not trying to convey anything to a character. I'm trying to convey this to the audience. You know, I want the readers to feel what he's feeling. Unlike a lot of other writers, I have no problem imagining that really dark side stuff. I kind of like that. It goes with the whole being a bad guy in wrestling, being a heavy metal fan, being a huge fan of horror films. I love that, and more importantly, the psychological side of it. You know, because there's the bad guy doing bad things, but then there's the what's going on inside that to trigger this person to do that stuff. And I think that's, to me, probably the most important part of the story in terms of getting the readers to be engaged and kind of pick a side, you know. But when you have a villain has something about them that's either vulnerable or somewhat likable, it makes it easier to tell their story. But again, I'm new to this. I just have like a ton of ideas. Who knows what's going to work?
Well, let me tell you, Michael Myers, one of my favorites. Okay, Halloween will forever be the best horror movie ever, and it's because of one simplistic little thing. His full emotion, the only time it's ever shown is when he all of a sudden cocks his head sideways, and you know it's that of him being returning to a child's mentality. And that one little motion of him not understanding but trying to understand is so impactful. And I've spoken with so many other authors that have, we kind of are in agreement when emotions are so important to a story, but the character traits, if you can take those traits, something as simplistic as cocking his head, and the person watching it or the reader reading it draws that emotion really deep. And even though you are scared of that character, you want to be his friend. You love this man. You know what I mean? You're like, it had to have been his parents. It had to have been something else. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, you can feel sorry for him.
Something organic. Yeah. Like somebody made this poor guy this way. Yeah. You know, and you just want to be the one to fix him. Maybe it's a woman thing. I know I'm gonna hear a backlash on this. But I personally, how's that?
I-
I just wanted to be like, Michael, honey, calm down.
it's like it's
I
like
love you. I love those movies. I do. I mean, because even when he goes to the yard and he's standing there and the child runs up to him, he just kind of looks down at him, you know, as though he recognizes himself in that child. And I mean, it's beautiful writing, you know. And on that note, how many of you, when you're writing the dialogue, think of those kind of things? Do your characters have a lot of those character traits?
Yeah. When I wrote this, I have very, very strong defined characters. And a lot of it comes from, you know, we all draw from our experiences. I was raised by my grandmother, and most people's grandmothers are like, you know, they're gentle and sweet and, you know, make you cookies. And my grandmother did some of that stuff, but make no mistake about it, my grandmother was old school. She ruled with an iron fist. My grandfather knew not to upset her. So as a result, I tend to write very, very strong female characters. You know, intelligent, but also they can be athletic. They can basically they have that, like, that strong backbone. Like, they don't really back down from anyone. And as you're doing that, in order to kind of inform the public, you do certain things in their dialogue, in their, you know, mannerisms that you describe, or, you know, and things of that nature. You try to paint the, you know, the ideal picture for them, but it does come through, and I try to make sure that it does. My wife was reading it. She's like, so who's like the wimpy person in the story? Like, who's the pushover? You know. She goes, because everyone that you mentioned, especially all the women, are fully capable of wielding a sword and have, you know, taken people out when necessary. I said, you know, it's just part of how I write those characters. You know, that's just how I write them. So yeah, I think I try to be very, right down to the way someone holds a cigar. One of the main characters is a big cigar smoker. And it's funny, my one of the first people that read the book after I published it was my uncle, and he had time. He's retired. He read the entire thing in like 4 days, 5 days, and he got back to me, because what I did was the cigars. They were very unique cigars, blah blah blah, and the names, the name that I gave the cigars were actually my grandparents' names. There's a brand of cigar called Garcia y Vega. It's basically two guys who set up in Cuba and then moved over to Tampa, and they have a hugely successful cigar business. Well, my grandparents' names were Gonzalez and Vargas, and so that was the name of the cigars, you know, and it came from the Caribbean, where they came from. And so my uncle read that, and he's like, wow, that's like really, really cool. But even as I'm describing that, I'm describing like how he lights the cigar and stuff, and how they hold it, and when he uses it and stuff. I try to do that because these stories are very much character driven. I want the characters to tell the story, so I try to be as descriptive as I can about them. Sometimes at the sacrifice of, you know, after reading it, going over it, I'm like, did I describe that scene enough? Are people getting that? You know, but honestly, I'd rather spend, if I'm going to use words to describe stuff, I'd rather focus on the traits of that character so that the audience can get to know them better, rather than a room where something is happening but may not happen. I might not use that room again. So yeah, for me, I'm definitely aware of that, because I want the audience to get that.
Okay. Glenn, how about you?
About character traits and sort of quirks. So yeah, I get to know my characters pretty well, and I think I think I spend less time talking about like individual mannerisms, and than I do on making sure that, you know, this person is acting the way that that is consistent and compelling. So I spend a lot of time on dialogue. I spend less time on, you know, tilt of the head. You know, I probably could do more of that sort of thing, I suppose.
I
But I
read
think
such literature, so that's my thing.
I totally get that, and I totally understand that. I think for me, it's about the dialogue. It's about making sure that that character comes to life in what they're saying. An editor told me, you know, if you write a line of dialogue and it could come from someone else's mouth, then you should rewrite it. So it really feels like that character is coming to life on the page.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, one of my characters in the book is schizophrenic. So, you know, he is having these, you know, different personalities that are having dialogue with each other. And so they all are very different, you know, their personalities and their little quirks. I have another character that is an older man who's having dementia, you know, so he's got these little quirks where he'll jump into the past and start saying things, and then he'll start like losing his temper and, you know, and have, you know, start shaking and stuff and thinking about other things. So yeah, so I definitely use a lot of that, you know, with the dialogue. Yes, you know, they're different. I try to bring those personalities out and make them, you know, you don't want the same character for everyone. You want everyone to be a little bit different and be a little bit recognized as different. And also what Anthony said, yeah, I have really strong female characters, and you know, and that I think Anthony, from your last name, and you said, you know, you must be Hispanic.
Yeah, I am.
Well, I mentioned my wife is Hispanic, so, and Hispanic women are usually very strong, and so
you're in trouble.
Yeah. So that's so one of the characters in my book is really a lot like her, you know. So she has a very, very strong personality that comes through, and, you know, she's very, 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 very tough girl.
Now, have all of you found your voice, or when did you find your voice? While you were during the course of writing your book, or was it something that you always felt was there and you just the story flowed and you could tell this is how I write, as opposed to the way other people write?
For me, I always felt the storytelling gene, so to speak, was always there. Like Scott said before, I just hadn't gotten to it. You know, and Glenn had a similar experience where the story was in the back of his mind. He wasn't physically working on it, but you kind of always had that there. I think for me, it clicked probably about a third of the way through this book, as I started gaining momentum on the characters, because the first few chapters, you as an author, you're still learning about the characters. You're still trying to decide who's doing what, who's where. Morally, where do they stand? For me in this one, it was, you know, they're in the middle of of the Revolutionary War is breaking out, and a lot of people don't understand this, but even the people who we revere as heroes of the Revolutionary War, in fact, were subjects of the crown, which the crown saw them as being traitors. So there was that conflict. Who am I? Am I an American? Am I a colonist fighting for, or am I a loyal subject? Do I want the comforts of nothing changing, or am I okay with some blood spilling as long as in the end we have freedom? So that part of it came about a third of the way through the book. And then once I found that, the rest of the book was not, I'm not going to say super easy, but it got a lot easier, because it's kind of like you got to the top of the hill, you know, with everything, all the research and stuff. And then once you got there, for me, it was like working downhill after that. Everything just, the momentum just kind of took over, and I was able to write much better dialogue and stuff. I had a couple of rewrites because I went back and I said, that could have been stronger. So I went back and I redid them, but now with the knowledge that I had at the end of the book, as opposed to as I was developing it.
Okay.
I think I wrote a lot before I wrote a book. I wrote, you know, tons of text in my adventure games and stuff. So I was familiar with writing. I think my voice in this particular book, part of it comes from the fact that I'm doing close third. So it's my main character. That's, you know, I'm in his head a lot of the times. He'll have dialogue that's in his head, telling what's going on, but also just the rhythm of the sentences, how to punctuate big events. All of that just is sort of how I've been writing for a long time. And I think it's pretty effective. People have reacted pretty well to it. So that's kind of how I got my voice.
I'm assuming everyone is a pantser when it comes to the type of writer they consider themselves. Is that correct?
No way. Absolutely not.
No, you do the outlines and
I'm 50-50.
I can't sit down unless I know what I'm going to be doing.
Really?
And I do it. I mean, it depends on sort of what you consider to be a pantser or a plotter, because I will know what the story is before sitting down. And then I need to know exactly what the chapter is that I'm walking into. But I don't know necessarily everything that's going to happen in the second chapter. Like for the book that I'm currently working on, I wrote 2 chapters and then I had to go back and completely rewrite all of it because I'm discovering things. And that happens in game development and happens in writing. It's like you need to know where you're going. You need to have a plan, but you have to give yourself opportunity for discovery. Because if you don't, then you can't take advantage of the really good stuff that's going to come up. But I can't, if I don't have a design, I can't start.
Well, then you would love me, my dear. I can go from start to finish and never stop long enough to even imagine anything different than where they're going. And I mean, I've been writing since I was 5 years old, and my mother was an English teacher, and she wrote herself. And let me tell you, when I was a little girl, that was her biggest thing was, honey, put a cap on it. And she would tell me stories. So I've been telling stories my entire life. And there's something with myself. It's very unnatural when I go to kind of plot things and I have to literally write it down because I will change it 1,000 times. You know, when I do it organically, boom, I'm there.
You probably have been doing it for so long that a lot of these things are natural for you. You sort of feel where the acts need to be and, you know, where these arcs need to go. And I admire that. I think that's great. I do need at least a bit of a roadmap before I start.
Well, the reason I am telling the difference is because, you know, when readers watch the show, I want them to understand there is no right or wrong way.
That's exactly right.
When you're character building, your character is within your own imagination, and stretch them as far as they can go. And, you know, part of putting a cap on a story, the ending, is they always act like the ending should be a finale. You know, and when I was a child, that's how I thought a story was supposed to go. Then I started watching television because when I was real little, we weren't real big on television. And I found out what a cliffhanger was. I did not like that.
No, that's terrible.
Busted my bubble into 1,000,000 pieces. And I was like, who did this? Did they forget the rest of the story? Did they just give up? And it took me a long time before I actually approached my mom and I was like, Mom, it's not finished. And she would say, well, honey, finish it. And that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I would take television shows. So through the course of my life, I've learned to write songs. I will change lyrics even on the radio. Let me tell you, some of the biggest groups, their songs would be, you know, a little bit different if I had my hand in it, just to let you know. But because of that, I have such a vested interest, not only from the reader's perspective, but an author's perspective. And I love everything about words. It's almost, it is truly a love affair. You know, that it becomes, I think more or less, I know I want to say with the words, because I've said it for years, I have a love affair with words, but it's the readers and the story. And now I'm having the pleasure of telling that story, you know, that I think is the most incredible gift. And you know, I love every minute of it.
Mm-hmm.
And for all of you, I wanted to ask you, as a child, now remember back just a little bit when you were a kid.
A long bit.
I know, I'm rocking that too. But I remember when you were a child and we were all running on adrenaline and imagination. And the littlest thing, the most minute thing became horrific and exciting and beautiful. And you never wanted to stop. It didn't matter if it was painful. It didn't matter, you know, if you were dragging your bike with your arm hanging sideways. It didn't matter. It was the excitement and thrill.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as authors, that is something that I pray I carry throughout my life, is that joy and excitement for the story.
Right.
You know, gentlemen, I love that y'all joined me, and I have had a wonderful time. And again, if you can put your books up, and Scott, bring up your page, and I'm going to go through and let each one of you tell the readers where they can get in touch with you. Okay. And always remember, readers, anyone viewing Night Vision, you're welcome to get in touch with me, and I can forward you to any one of the authors that appeared tonight. Okay. So Scott, let's start you off.
Okay. Hold on here. All right. Whoops. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right. So yeah, so there's the cover of my book. I call him him. Yeah, you can find it on, it's exclusive on Amazon, you know, so it's Kindle Unlimited, ebook, and paperback. And the second book, like I said, comes out in 2 more weeks, The Angel of Death. Oh, wait a minute, actually, I could throw the cover up there, that one real quick too. Hold on.
There we go.
Oh, okay, there's the cover for the second one. So
All right.
that one is also exclusive on Amazon. So.
Okay, beautiful. Glenn?
So, okay. This is my book again, Child of Chaos. Piers Anthony, I don't know if you know Piers Anthony, he's the author of Xanth books.
Yes.
He actually, I sent him a copy of my book, and he told me he probably wouldn't have time to read it. The next day, he got back to me with a wonderful review. And one of the quotes is, "This is what fantasy fiction should be." It was an amazing experience for me to be able to get it on here. You can find this book on Amazon. If you want to get a signed copy of the hardback or the paperback, go to mysterium.blog or mysteriummerchandise.bigcartel.com, but mysterium.blog will take you there. You can find the audiobook on audible.com. All of the link to the ebook and the audiobook are all on Amazon as well. So just search under Child of Chaos or me, and you'll find it.
Okay.
All right.
Anthony?
Once again, this is Legacy. It's an Amazon exclusive, so it's available for Kindle Unlimited and obviously the paperback. One thing I forgot to mention before, it's actually also available in Spanish. English is technically my second language because my grandmother didn't speak English, and if I was hungry, I had to communicate that in Spanish, and I wasn't about to skip meals over a technicality. So Spanish now for years now, like I think it's my English is my primary language, but I still speak it, read it, write it perfectly in Spanish. So I actually did the Spanish version as well, which is called Legado, which is legacy in Spanish. And the best way for people to find me on Amazon is just put in my name, Anthony Tonelli, because there are a couple of other books that have legacy in them. But if you put my name or put legacy with my name, it will pop right up. Both of them will pop right up. And both are for Kindle Unlimited, get the ebook and paperback. I can also be reached at anthonytonelli.com, which is my own website. And probably the coolest feature that's on there is my blog, which I set it up just a few days ago. People are more than welcome to come on there. And the blog basically it'll give updates and stuff, but it's more me communicating with the audience and letting them know about my journey as a writer, things that are new to me, things that I'm experiencing. I like to put that up there, like, to interact with the fans, and basically they can feel free to reach out and contact. But I'm on all the major sites. I'm on Twitter at A World of His Own. It's at A World of His Own too. Also, A World of His Own is my Facebook page as well. I can communicate in any which way for anybody who's interested in. But thanks a lot for having me on here. For a new writer, this is super cool and exciting. I'm still new to the publicity game, but luckily my wife was like, well, what do you have to do? I said, well, I have to talk to people. She goes, you don't shut up. You'll be fine.
You did beautiful.
Thank you.
Trust me, and you came to the perfect place. Because ordinarily, and thank you, gentlemen, because this is the first time I have not almost lost my voice. Usually I'm the one, blah, 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 blah. And so it's a welcome, beautiful relief. I love when everyone interacts. This is why I do this show. I have had a wonderful time, and I wish all of you much success, okay? And you guys have a beautiful night. And if you care to join us ever again, please get in touch with me, Opus Night, okay? And everyone, to all our readers and all of our fans and all of our viewers, we thank you for your time, and we hope that you will check out Scott, Glenn, Anthony, because it sounds like you'll have a wonderful read. Thank you. Have a wonderful night, guys.
Thanks very much for having us on.
Have a good night.
Very, very
Have a good
welcome.
night.
Good night.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.